Hi, Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedules. I'm going to start off by just giving you a little bit of background. I'm one of the co-founders of Language Tree Online. A little bit about us. We've been around for a long time, since 2003, and we've always been very focused on language acquisition. But we've spent the last 5 years solely focused on English language development, specifically for secondary students, middle and high school, because as we all know, these students really need the most support because they have the shortest ramp until graduation. And my co-presenter joining me today is David Noyes, and he's a national board certified ELD educator. And he's also the K-12 EL coach for Long Beach Unified School District, which is one of our largest districts here in California. So he has a lot of firsthand experience. And so what we want to do today is talk a little bit about serving our newcomer students, specifically our beginning English learners. And then we're going to go through this short presentation. And then once we finish that, I'll switch gears and I'll take you in and show you everything, firsthand.
All right, thank you for having us, everybody. We just wanted to talk to you a little bit around kind of the foundation of building a comprehensive program for newcomers and beginning language learners. First and foremost, I think it's important to recognize that we've had an influx of our newcomer or our beginning or emerging English learners across the United States, coming from very, very different backgrounds, but nonetheless equally important around being able to educate them. In the secondary schools, there's been a limited number of resources, especially around acculturation. So our students that are coming from, again, from very diverse backgrounds, understanding how the US American school culture works, helping them feel connected, some of those socio-emotional aspects that are so incredibly important for our students, but considering that acculturation process. Additionally, foundational literacy skills. All of our students come in with different levels of literacy in their primary language, some more than others, but as we know that the English language is the foundational literacy skills with English language are incredibly difficult for our students to ramp up and have in their pockets, so to speak, so quickly. And our students in secondary schools really need some very explicit instruction around foundational literacy skills in English. Lastly, summative informative data. We have a lot of summative data where students may be assessed on their language level that teachers may see annually or at the end of the year, but it really lacks qualitative data, or what do we do in the moment around supporting our English learners? And we also call that formative data. And culturally responsive pedagogy. We know that our students need to, we want our students to be able to see themselves in the lessons and the materials that we present to them, so they know that they are part of that, that context, if you will, but really looking at some aspects of culturally responsive pedagogy. So these are some of the key components for really accelerating language for our newcomers. So just to kind of throw out to all of you, it's nice just to kind of do a quick check-in and ask you what sort of formative and summative assessments that you might be using with your secondary learners, either at the district level or at your sites. And you could just be calling out resources or some of your own strategies, tricks that you're using, resources. So we're just going to open up the chat for a minute. And if you want to throw in a couple of responses around formative and summative assessments or resources that you use to address the needs of your English learners.
Yeah, maybe while everyone's taking a minute to do that, we have a question, David. Someone was asking, are there CPDUs? And somebody else, sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think that has to do with that's a credit for watching the webinar, Jen. So I don't know,
okay.
I can't answer that question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm able to send an email that you've attended the webinar, but that's about all that we can do for that. So if that's what would work for you, just let me know in the chat and I'll make sure I'll send you an email for that.
And Anita, usually that that does suffice if you just turn in the fact that you attended the webinar.
Okay, well, we've got,
We did have a response. They said they use WIDA too.
Yeah.
And yes, the WIDA standards are used to assess the summatively assess the needs of our English learners at different levels. So absolutely, that WIDA assessment. So thank you.
yeah, the WIDA access. Okay, well, I'm going to keep moving along here because I know we trying to keep it within 30 minutes. So, you know, let's talk a minute about assessments. So essentially, this program has, you know, entry and exit assessments. What's different about these assessments compared to like WIDA Access or, for example, the LPAC in California or TEKS in Texas and what have you is that our assessments are not designed to redesignate or say you're at this level. Our assessments are really designed to help you as educators pinpoint the skill gaps of your individual English learner students. So in order to do that, what we did is we broke it into like 3 areas. I like to refer to it as buckets. But we have the foundational literacy skills, the collaborative listening and speaking, and the language function and construction bucket. And what we did is we put a single ELD standard per question. So 1 standard per question, but we have more than 1 question with that standard in it. So each bucket has 25 questions. So all in, it's a very thorough assessment, 75. And, you know, it's online, so we wouldn't want our students to sit down and do a 75 question assessment all at once. But the nice thing is, you know, they can just get where they get and do it over, you know, several days. And then just, you know, pick up where they left off. But again, we just really want to help educators, especially when we're working with our newcomer students and our beginning English learners, be able to pinpoint what are the skill gaps. And you know, that can help determine what the teaching next steps are. So from there, that corresponds to our standards-based lessons. And so you'll see those same, you know, 3 buckets. And we use a very uniform teaching style from the perspective that there's the virtual professor, and the virtual professor provides the lesson input. And then there's questions after that that really are about evaluating their understanding of that lesson input, and those are tracked and graded. And then it also allows you to go in and look and see how your students are doing. And for example, you know, be able to see if it took a student many attempts to pass a certain lesson, then, you know, it's a good indicator. The intervention would be to use the downloadable activities, and there's downloadable activities for every online lesson. And those are resources that you can use either whole class or small group, you know, to work with your students and really make your own formative assessment on how they're doing with that particular language, function, or skill. So I know this is all a lot of small print, but over here on the right-hand side, it just, you know, gives you a descriptor of what each lesson is covering. And then the last piece to talk about as it relates to the ELD Level 1 program is our American School Culture module. And I always like to say, think of American school culture as being totally separate from the standards, has nothing to do with the standards-based assessments or the standards-based lessons. The American School Culture module is really there to help our newcomer students acculturate, help them with their social and emotional needs, and help them gain that all-important functional or background vocabulary. And so what we did is we put American school culture into 6 chapters. And so these are, you know, you can see on the screen here what each chapter is talking about. It's all in and around school in America, kind of the ins and outs of school here, and some really important elements like extracurricular activities, which I think is great for our newcomers. It's great for them to know, that our schools have different types of offerings like clubs, intramural sports, chess club, what have you. And it's a nice way for them to be involved in something with peers that have a similar interest. Because a big need of our newcomers is they want to make a friend and fit in. And so American school culture really helps a lot with that. And then we have one chapter all about our holidays and traditions in America, which is another great way to understand the new culture that they're in. So with the American school culture, there's the video input, and that can be, they can select either English or Spanish for that. Then there's the interactive pieces, and because it's for newcomers, they're very simple and straightforward, like yes, no type questions. And then we have a vocabulary builder that's really just scaffolded vocabulary, and it too has video input and interactive exercises. And just the last piece is for every online chapter, we also have downloadable activities. And, just to let you know, like with some of our newcomers that may be SLIFE students or students with no language transfer skills, it's really great just to start with the downloadable activities and help them, build some schema before they even go in and work in the program.
Right. We wanted to just give you a little bit of context around how the two levels are built. ELD level 1 being built for our newcomers and our emerging or beginning level learners. But we also needed a trajectory. And so an ELD level 2 was created for our students that are at that intermediate or expanding level of language, and also our long-term English learners that where our students tend to kind of get stuck. And so without kind of moving forward, our students tend to lack that redesignation criteria. So in level 1, just to kind of call out a few of the characteristics that are built for the program is it's developed for students from 0 to about 24 months. The lessons are highly scaffolded. They're a multi-sensory approach, and we have integrated academic language, but it's purported or proposed to the students in a way that the students are actually practicing and learning through visual descriptions and lots of auditory input. There are some online interactive practice exercises for every lesson, including oral practice. So these are, again, highly scaffolded for our students to learn the language, that productive opportunity. The American school culture component is built in to build some of that functional vocabulary for those students that are struggling with just basic vocabulary. So this is oftentimes a place where we start with our newcomers. And additionally, as Jennifer alluded to, we have the downloadable instructional routines to build that productive and collaborative practice for the language. In ELD level 2, the standards are the same, but we tend to amplify the discipline or the language function or skill. And we do this by actually looking at all of the language levels or the language standards across WIDA, California, Texas. In level 2, we built it for our students, again, that are long-term English learners beyond that 24 months. The standards-based lesson take on a little bit of a different twist, though. In the lessons here, we are actually accompanying content with the language function or skill. So think of that subject matter, social studies, math, or science being the passenger in the car with those important language skills and functions being taught. The online interactive exercises actually include oral practice and recording, but the downloadable practice is actually online. So the students, in addition to doing the online interactive activity, the teacher can assign additional practice for the student to practice at home or in a school setting or in a small group setting as well.
Great, thank you, David. I think for the sake of time, everyone, hopefully it's okay. I'm going to switch gears and just go right in because we have about 10, 12 minutes left, and I want you to kind of really get a feel for this and how it may work for your newcomers and your beginning English learners. So let me switch gears here, and I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to use a teacher, whoops, didn't mean to capitalize that, a teacher demo account. And one of the things I'd like to point out is that in our program, it's the same view. So whether you're a teacher or a student, the views look exactly the same. We did that on purpose. The only difference is teachers have access to the reporting, and this here, the teacher resources. But besides that, everything else is the same. So I'm just going to click on ELD1 entry assessment. So this is where everybody would start. And, we talked about already in the presentation, these 3 buckets. So each one of these buckets has 25 assessment questions. So they'll start with foundational literacy skills, get through all 25, submit that, then they'll start with collaborative, get through all 25, and then language function and construction. So I'll just, let me just click on one here and kind of give you a feel for what an assessment question looks like.
Look at the picture and listen to this sentence. Angela went to the library to check out a book. Which word below can be used to replace the name Angela? She, he, it, they.
So you can tell in level 1, it's highly scaffolded. So they have, image support, audio support, text support. And I'm just going to go to the next page because I wanted you to see how, I mentioned there's a single standard per question, but there's more than one question with that standard in it. So you can see here we're assessing knowledge of pronouns.
Look at the picture and listen to the sentence. John likes to eat ice cream after school. Which word below can be used to replace the name John?
So I think you get the idea. So I'm going to go back to home here. And so let's say, for example, in your class, you have all your students have completed all 3 of those bucket areas of the ELD level 1 entry assessment. And now you can go in to see how they did. So you would select ELD1 entry assessment and grades. And let me just scroll over. You can see these are my demo students, but essentially, we'll just look at language student 2. So we can see he got a 56% in foundational, 42 in collaborative, a 40 in language function and construction. So really our rule of thumb is that anything that is below 90%, we recommend that they would go through those equivalent lesson buckets. So in the case of my language student 2, he would go through all lessons in all 3 areas. This little magnifying glass is nice because you can click that and it gives you good detail, like how long the student was in the system, the questions he got right and wrong. I can scroll down and see, where he fell out. So the questions that he missed, I could even play it.
Which 3 letters come next?
So let me go back to home here. And then we'll go to the lesson modules. So like I said, the lesson modules correspond to the assessments. And you see those same 3 buckets. And just to let you know, let me just click on foundational literacy skills. So in level 1, the foundational literacy skills are really, what's taught in kinder, 1st, 2nd grade. But the difference here is that for our newcomers, our beginning English learners, they too really need these foundational literacy skills, as we all know. But we were really cognizant of our audience. So it's really geared towards an older student. There's no cartoon characters or sing-along songs that can be very off-putting to an older student. So it's relevant for their age. And the way the program works is they would start with lesson 1, letter identification, and they would need to get 80% or higher to move on to lesson 2. If they get below 80%, then they have to retake that lesson because we want them to have a level of mastery since each lesson builds upon the next. The other thing too is that you're able to go in, let me just go back here and show you something really quick. You're able to go in and monitor ELD1 lesson modules as a teacher to see how your students are doing. So if I look at my language student 3, I see she got 99% on lesson 1, which is great, but I can click on this and see her number of attempts, right? Because she has to get, so it took her 2 attempts to get 80% or higher. But let's say, you know, you see 3, 4, 5 attempts here, then that's a good indication that intervention is needed because, you know, they're having issues with that particular lesson, that language function or skill. And that's when the downloadable resources really come in handy. And I'll show you those in just a minute, but I want to go back and show you a little bit of a lesson. And I'm going to show you a bit of a lesson in language function and construction in lesson 2, only because I had showed a couple of the assessment questions around pronouns. So now this is the lesson on pronouns. We start at the beginning, and I'll just turn this off so my screen's a bit bigger.
In this lesson, we will learn about personal pronouns and how they are used in reading and writing. Let's review. A personal pronoun can refer to a person, place, thing, or idea. Here's an example. The boy walks to school. He walks to school. The pronoun he is used to rename the noun boy.
I'm just going to stop it there because I want to get through some other things. But yeah, so the video is the lesson input. And, you know, that's done by the virtual professor. And then, you know, we have a standard T chart here and then their instructions.
Look at the pictures below. Choose the correct pronoun.
So these are the questions that are tracked and graded by the system. And if you look at my little quiz navigation up here, all these questions following are relevant to this input. When you see another I, that means there's more lesson input and questions and more lesson input and questions. So that's how it's structured. And I'm going to go back to home now.
Jen, I was just going to add that the reason why it was organized that way is it lends itself for the teacher to be kind of the pilot. If they're doing this whole class with their students or working in a small group, it allows the students to kind of chunk and chew the information, and the teacher can expand on that information. The students could be writing in their language journals. The teacher might have a few other examples that they might be adding. So it really allows the teacher the flexibility to have the language input, but also to be able to kind of modify the instruction or amplify the instruction. So we didn't want this to just be something that the student is passively going through. The teacher has the opportunity to interact with the content as well.
Great, thanks, David. So yeah, kind of going back to what I was saying about, you know, the intervention piece, and, you know, you notice the student had multiple attempts before they could get the 80% or higher on that lesson. So if you go to the teacher resources, and let's go to ELD1 downloadables, just to stick with that same lesson, I'm going to go to the link. So you see the 3 buckets. I'm going to go to the language function and construction. Again, lesson 2 on pronouns. So every lesson has downloadables. They can range anywhere from 10 to 30 pages, depending on the standard, because each lesson covers a standard. And so some of the standards that are more complex, you'll notice the lessons are longer. But what we use for the downloadables is input model check. And we really wanted to have everything here for educators so that you don't have to source anything. So we're very descriptive on each task. And I'm just sorry about all the scrolling, but, you know, we have the picture cards, everything that you would need. And it's highly scaffolded. So it always goes to a point where there's a writing exercise. So I'll show you, like here, for example, we have a word bank of pronouns and a picture or an image, and now they're going to use a pronoun and create and write their own sentences. And so, you know, the downloadables, like David mentioned, they could be used, you know, in small group or whole class. I've done plenty of observations where teachers have their students working independently on their Chromebooks, and then they'll pull students of a similar level and work with the downloadables in a small group setting. The last piece that I want to show, and I know we're almost out of time, but is important, is the American School Cultures. And that's the module that is specifically for our newcomers, again, to help them acculturate and become comfortable in their new school and country. So these are the chapters. As I mentioned, they can watch English or Spanish. Then there's the interactive piece and the vocabulary builder. So I'm gonna show you one of my favorite chapters, the holidays and traditions. So you can get a little bit of an idea of what American school culture is like.
A fun way to learn about a culture is to participate in their traditions. Here are a few key holidays that Americans celebrate. But remember, school is closed on some, but not all. January 1st is New Year's Day. The night before is called New Year's Eve, and that's when people attend parties and celebrations that last throughout midnight. On New Year's Day, there's a famous college football game known as the Rose Bowl. Friends and families often get together to watch the historic Rose Parade that happens before the game and the Rose Bowl game on TV. New Year's Day is also a time of creating New Year's resolutions, which are promises to yourself to improve in a particular area, such as exercising more or being nicer to your sister. Every third Monday in January is a school holiday recognizing Martin Luther King Jr. He was a leader in the African American civil rights movement.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop it there, but I think you get the gist that we go month by month by month, and every holiday and tradition that's celebrated in America. And then from there, students, after going through the input video, then they go to the interactive piece. And again, it's for newcomers, so you'll notice the question types are very straightforward.
Select the correct image for each vocabulary word. New Year's resolution.
You know, so they would go through, and there's a lot of activities, as you can see. And then the last piece, would be the vocabulary builder. And so it would make sense, you know, that we talked about the holidays and traditions across the calendar. So now we're going to, in the vocabulary builder, teach the months of the year.
Let's review the months of the year. January, February.
And then the interactive exercises.
Look at the calendar below. Put the months of the year in the correct order by selecting each month and dropping it into the calendar.
So we really try to mix things up, not only in American school culture, but in the lesson modules as well, to really make it, you know, interesting for students and have the activities be very different. So they're not, you know, it's not always just multiple choice or something like that. And then, yeah, so then they would go on, and there's more lesson input and more activities in the American school culture. That's a really quick overview, but I know we're at time, so I wanted to make sure I left a couple minutes here to open it up to see if anybody has any questions or anything.
Hi, Jennifer. One of the questions is, are students able to go back to the lesson on their own to review independently?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, all of this is hosted in the cloud, and students and teachers have their unique login credentials. So as long as you have an internet enabled device, you're able to go in as many times as you would like. So many students can go through this at home if they want to. And what's been kind of neat is with our American School Culture module, we've heard from some of our partner districts that it has served as a really good family activity, because a lot of our newcomers, our beginning English learners, you know, their parents have never been to school in America. So it's fun for them to do as a family to see what it's like, and it helps everybody gain some functional vocabulary.
Are there options for the language of the instruction?
So when it comes to the standards-based assessments and standards-based lessons, it's English only, because that's, you know, what they're living every day. And that when they do the state standardized testing like WIDA Access or LPAC or what have you, so we don't offer, you know, translation or anything like that. But for American school culture, we know that there's a lot more languages than Spanish, but given our country's demographic, that's the one that we, you know, had been asked about the most. So we have that in both English and Spanish.
Great. It looks like David already answered a question in the chat. The next question is, will this program last me through the school year?
I can go ahead and answer that. We have pacing guides and that kind of comprehensively walk the teachers through the delivery of the lessons. And if the lessons, where the assessment, the lessons and the resources are used in a way that really monitors the students' progress, that is absolutely correct, yes. And that is another reason why we offer the level 1 moving into actual level 2, because we want the students to actually progress into a higher level. Suffice to say, level 2 is much more complex. The rigor goes way up. And the whole idea is for those students to be at or almost at a redesignation level by the time they finish level 2. But good question. Yes. So if done effectively and using the pacing guides, it would take all year. Keep in mind, this is a supplemental program as well. So it can be used for intervention. It can be used during Saturday school. We have a lot of tutoring groups that are using them in multiple school districts. ELD classes or ELD classes that are 0 and 6th period or 7th period. So the resources are used flexibly.
Great. And then I think we did kind of cover this throughout the presentation, but many of my newcomers don't have any language transfer skills. How can they use this program?
I can go ahead and answer that, since we've kind of been implementing this in the classrooms with multiple ways to kind of address the needs of those students that are sitting right in front of you. We usually begin or we suggest with those newcomers that have absolutely no productive language whatsoever. It's very limited. We start with the American school culture because the functional vocabulary is built into those lessons, and it provides kind of a setting for students to not only acclimate to a middle or high school setting, but in addition to that, they're learning a lot of that functional vocabulary that they need to have to move them into just really basic English skills. So beyond that, that's when we have them go into the entry assessment and then build the lessons from there.
Great. And I think I'll just give it a second, but I think the rest of the questions have been addressed in chat. And I did want to mention, anybody who's looking for pricing or a quote, it would be best to email info@studica.com and we'll be able to get you a personalized estimate of what the cost would be. And then everyone, thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to you, Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. And again, we appreciate your time today. You know, as Christy mentioned, just to let you know, Studica is our partner in education. And so they are the ones, and they have great representatives that you can reach out to, and they'll help you, you know, with pricing, or if you want to see a more in-depth demo or what have you, you know, just reach out to them directly. So with that, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Be
Great.
safe.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and David. And just a reminder to everyone, if you could just take a moment at the end of the webinar and just complete that survey for us, we should really appreciate it. And thank you and have a great day.